looking at a lot of what they've had to say in the past. And in this particular issue, the topic of trying to save our country through a balanced budget is well laid out. The 6 points are: does this balance the budget in less than 10 years without raising taxes and keeps the budget in balance thereafter? Does it swiftly overhaul entitlement programs, including Social Security, to guarantee economic security to seniors while making the programs affordable? Repeals Obamacare in its entirety, fully funds defense, rolls back discretionary spending, and, last but not least, rolls back recent tax increases with a sweeping, growth-oriented tax reform plan and caps taxes at the historical average of 18.5%. Now, how does the Ryan plan stack up to the Heritage Foundation plan? Well, we'll go over that point by point. But before I go any further with that, I'd like to point out that personally, I would not only like growth-oriented tax reform, I would say take the fair tax as it's currently written and go from there. Because the fair tax is the best thing that we've got out there. Whether anybody likes it or not, there is no way that we can do anything that's any better than the fair tax. I don't care what kind of flat tax you want to put out there. I don't care what kind of value-added tax. The flat tax is the best response. But let's go ahead. Just without getting too far into details, how does the Ryan plan measure up? First of all, gets to the balance. The Ryan budget achieves an important improvement over last year by balancing the budget within 10 years. The president's budgets have never even attempted to be balanced, and given the Senate's rusty skills in budget writing, it's unlikely they would choose this course either. The Ryan budget slows the growth of spending to about 3.4% per year compared to roughly 5% today, and with about $5 trillion less spending. Regrettably, however, Ryan's budget also relies on Obama's $618 billion fiscal cliff tax increase and Obamacare's $1 trillion in tax hikes. More on that a little bit later, but it relies on both these major tax increases to get to the balance. That means that the tax levels rise almost immediately to 19.1% of GDP, well over the 18.5% benchmark set out by Heritage, and it was considerably less than the benchmark that would be set out by the fair tax. Balance is important, but so is the size of government. Without the tax increase, this budget would have to be more assertive in attacking spending and reforming entitlements to achieve and sustain balance. The important thing to remember, ladies and gentlemen, the important things to remember when you're talking about balancing the budget is there's two ways to do that. Number one is to cut spending, and that's what we need to do. Number two, and this is the path that Obama and his Democrat pals want to take, and that's just keep raising taxes. Problem is, there's not enough wealth in this nation held privately left for you to take all of it and cover even just the national debt. So you got to make a choice. At some point, it's going to hurt, but the cuts are going to have to be made. At any rate, I digress. While the intent, we're told, is to stay in balance in the coming years and decades, regrettably, as the Congressional Budget Office has not updated its long-term model yet, there is no CBO scoring to say how or whether that even happens. Something else to remember when it comes to any plan that's set out for 10 years, which almost everybody now says over the next 10 years. Can you think of, since, I don't know, the late 1800s has there been anything laid out by Congress for a 6-year or longer plan that has been left unchanged for more than 2 years. Bottom line is you don't ever have to achieve any results like this. Anyway, the second point, does it repeal Obamacare's spending but keeps the taxes? This is what it does. The vital organs of Obamacare, if you'll forgive the pun, the insurance exchange subsidies and Medicaid expansions, are scheduled to start next year. Ryan's budget takes the correct and necessary step of repealing them. But, as already noted, perhaps the biggest shortcomings of this budget is that it keeps the tax increases associated with Obamacare. So we're going to eliminate some of the spending that's been laid out by this, but we're going to keep the money that's coming into it. That really doesn't sound too conservative to me, but maybe that's the Budget Committee's idea of a compromise. I don't know. These tax hikes are the oxygen that fuels the fire of ever bigger spending. But the entire fire needs to be put out. All of Obamacare should be repealed, including its tax hikes. Defense funding levels are mixed. Like last year, the Ryan budget protects defense from the eviscerating sequestration cuts. That's sound, especially as North Korea's posturing shows. The world is not a safer place today. But the national defense budget has been squeezed by Obama's reductions just when the U.S. forces need replenishment and modernization. Ryan's budget essentially adopts the defense spending caps in the Budget Control Act without sequestration. This is better than the president's plainly inadequate funding for current and future needs, and certainly better than the sequestration, but still, it's less than what's required. Entitlement reforms, definitely more needed in the Ryan plan. Ryan continues to be a strong leader here, tackling Medicare's objective failures head on. His signature solution of a premium support model for Medicare is the hallmark of his budget. Moving to a patient-centered model would free retirees from relying on the unstable and unsustainable government-run Medicare program, and it would restrain costs through the competition rather than price fixing. The sooner this transition's made, the better. But the transition is too slow, as it once again exempts those over 55 from these changes to Medicare. Our spending problem is so severe that all Americans should be part of the solution. While this grandfather clause is understandable, most Americans this age will have more than a decade remaining in their working lives. We cannot continue to keep leaving one more year of the baby boomer generation out of the solution because Washington fails to act. Though the budget takes the first step on by turning Medicaid into a block grant, more important is to move the mainstream Medicaid population into private insurance. And discouragingly, like last year, there is no Social Security reform at all. This is especially disappointing given the current discussions of common sense, simple reforms, like increasing the retirement age or moving to a more accurate measure of inflation, like chained CPI. Bottom line is these are sacred cows. Nobody wants to have a finger pointed at them for doing it. And it doesn't even matter because the AARP has already started their attack ads against this budget anyway. I heard the first one this morning, early. There's no way they could have made that overnight and had it ready to air in the markets like the Knoxville area. They had this ready to go from the beginning, and it's already, this is going to hurt seniors. Obviously, they hadn't even paid attention to look at that part, because the seniors that are already counting on it aren't going to be affected at this at all. Something they really don't want to hear is Social Security has become a social program. It has become an entitlement program because, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, but the money you sent in, the money I've been sending in for the last 30 years, is already gone. It's been spent. We're going to get the money you're getting now, if you're receiving it, is coming from me. The money I'm going to get is going to be coming from my kids. It's already gone. And that's assuming that there's anything left to get by the time I'm ready to retire, if we don't do something to fix the programs overall. Now, I personally would love to be able to keep that money, invest it myself, and plan for my own retirement, because, like it or not, strictly constitutionally speaking, the federal government has no business being in the retirement business. You are responsible for your own retirement. And, if you're depending on the government for it, you're going to be sadly disappointed anyway. Back to the budget. I'll back off my soapbox a little. Reductions to non-defense discretionary spending. By extending the Budget Control Act's spending caps for 2 more years and keeping sequestration levels, the Ryan budget makes strong reductions to this level of spending. It also assumes some worthy and long overdue reforms, such as consolidating the federal government's 49 job training programs, many of which are ineffective, and first steps at reining in farm subsidies. Growth-oriented tax reform. The Ryan budget lays out important principles for tax reform and rightly rejects closing tax preferences, also known as loopholes, just to raise revenue. True tax reform is revenue neutral. Any revenue raised by eliminating a tax preference should be offset by lowering tax rates. The budget sets the same pro-growth goals for fewer, lower rates and totalitarian as last year's. Bottom line, it looks about the same as the budget that he proposed last year, that, of course, was also DOA. And the bottom line of this particular comparison, the Ryan budget delivers on its new promise this year to balance the budget within the decade. Unfortunately, it does use higher taxes to help achieve it. It maintains Ryan's signature reform to Medicare, which will go far towards reining in unaffordable entitlement spending, but though more could be done along the lines of saving the American dream, to advance bolder entitlement reforms, and to throw off the yoke of Obama's tax hikes. This budget takes the first step towards reining in spending and reforming entitlements. And if preliminary news reports are to be believed, we probably know how that goes, though, this plan is sure to be far superior to the Senate's version, now awaiting its finishing touches, replete with still more tax increases, spending, and looming deficits. So why are we talking about this? We know why they did it. They did it because it's the job. The Senate's actually going to present a budget. Is it going to pass it? Probably not. Is there any reason for us to be hopeful that anything positive is going to come out of this? Yeah, there's lots of reasons to be hopeful. Hopefully, the Republican Party is going to get better at getting its message across to the American people of why these things have to be done. I made the point already. This balances a budget in 10 years' time, but it keeps taxes that they want to do away with, the so-called benefits. And Obamacare is a joke anyway. The taxes on medical equipment are now officially going into effect for your veterinarians.